All right, we are episode 13, Roll for Mastery. Julie has selected our topic again tonight, as she did last session, session 12, and we're going to talk about mapping and terrain. So, before we get into it, Julie, Mike, I want to raise the question to you. Or let me ask you this first. Before we get into your physical terrain and mapping there at your game table, your physical in-person table, what about when you're online play?
TTRPGs.
What are you doing for mapping for, what do you do for that on online play? Obviously, you're not using physical terrain. I take that
No.
back. You can still use physical terrain. I've
And a
seen people do
camera,
it.
a little
Yes,
tripod.
yes. I was introduced to a
Little
channel
point
called
mount.
Dungeon Delver here on YouTube, and I've watched him a little bit, but he's a 1E channel, and he plays remotely. Three or four guys he has remote in, and they put their little screen in their video feed, and he has a video camera on his table for his terrain, and he will physically puts out the terrain, physically moves the minis around.
That's so great.
So yes,
That's a lot of work for
it
him.
is. So you can use physical terrain in an online game, depending how you do it. Most
I
people
would
don't
use
do
a
that
pretty
because most people are going to be playing, fifth edition,
BTT.
and there are some resources out there.
So many.
TTRPGs, right? I'm sorry. Actually, yeah, no,
BTT.
VTT, excuse me, virtual tabletop VTTs, and they have all these tools and stuff built in. But just the same, you could still put a camera for your physical terrain and show people. But not everyone uses those resources when they play online. Case in point, we play online. Julie and I play online together,
Yep.
and we don't use a VTT.
No.
We use Discord and some screen sharing, and that's the extent of our VTT. We don't have one at all. I don't have a camera for terrain because I don't have physical terrain. Um, so not everyone uses a VTT. So even in our online game, I've done some 3D mapping using some like
Microsoft
AI
Paint.
3D mapping called Dungeon Alchemist. And we've also done some simple 2D mapping where there's a map on the screen that's fogged over. I slowly unpaint the fog, remove the fog as the party progresses through, and I simply paint dots to represent the characters on the map. And
Tokens,
it
yeah.
works well. The best part is that it's free. We like that. We like free, but it works for us. It's simple, but it works. It does take away from
Take
pacing a
some
little
magic.
bit. It does take a little bit of time to paint the dots and erase the dots and so on, but it works for us. We have fun with it, and that's the most important thing. Whatever method you use, make sure everyone's having a good time. And that's all I'm going to
Yeah.
say for online stuff. Now, Julie loves
Love to
her
hear
she
from.
loves her terrain. She loves her minis. She has thousands of unpainted minis because she just goes print, 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 and she prints all these minis and this terrain, none of which or hardly any of which is painted, but she's got it
Mhm.
all. She's got it
Yeah.
all, and she
All
loves to
the
use it.
stuff.
Her trees are awesome. I will
I'm a
say that
maximalist.
absolutely. She's her her trees are awesome. Um, so
Those are from a company I use. It's like an HO company, like for model
yeah,
trains.
yeah, that is exactly what
Um,
they look like. Yeah.
yeah, so they're the bigger model train, but for 28 millimeter, it works that they are like smaller or regular size tree. Where an HO standard, they would be massive. They would be like the granddaddy oak in your
All
park.
right, so since you use the physical terrain in your in-person game and I
Mm.
don't, um, let's talk about physical terrain before we start talk about how you map, at your game table, in person or online. I don't think either one of us will be able to talk too much about online mapping or digital virtual mapping, but tell us about you. Tell
I'd
me
like
about your
to,
terrain.
but I don't have any experience doing it. I use a battle board for the most part. And then what I like to do is I like to give room for the imagination. So I will do like some things like I've been doing for when we're on the road, uh, traveling through the lands of Barovia. I just do it on a green battle board with a grid. And I just do a line of trees. And sometimes I squish the trees together and make it a really tight little narrow. Or sometimes I widen the road out, and in a clearing, I have some houses. I have an old church. I'll just plop a building in there. I really wanted to. My party's been at a camp, an encampment, and I had a wagon I really wanted to do like a bonfire and a wagon and some tents, but I never got around to it, which makes me a bad DM. No, I'm kidding. I like to give the theoretic Sunday a sprinkle. I don't want to make the Sunday and give you sprinkles. I want to just give you a sprinkling on what's already there. There are some people who make entire tables, and they're crazy, and they're modular tiles, and they have stairs, individual stairs, and windows and things. And would I love to do that? Yes. Do I have the time to do that? No. So an expo board and some expo markers for interior stuff is I like to do that a lot. Otherwise, if they're like using minis and they're on the road, then I'll just do a kind of a generalized. This is what it looks like, and I think it works out pretty well for the most part.
The terrain that you use, is it mostly for, I'll say, like dungeon crawling, interior stuff, or is it more outdoorsy, exterior stuff?
Exterior. I just use an expo board when we're in the dungeon.
Okay.
I flip a mat over, and the other side of my mat is cobblestone, and then I just draw it. I don't draw all of it. I draw it as they, so I
Yeah, yeah,
dynamic
as they go
lighting.
along. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So, um, staying with terrain, and you and I've talked about this to some extent before, so I'll raise it again.
and all my
Um,
players love their stupid little minis, and I love all my stupid little minis. And
um, for purpose of discussion, and for anyone who might watch this later, us or someone
you can do with
else,
cardboard though. I've seen people do some crazy cardboard builds.
at what point, or I shouldn't say at what point,
Cardboard and paper.
how much impact does physical 3D terrain have? Like,
I think a lot.
yeah, I think it does. I think it's very helpful. Um, nothing
Get you in the
wrong,
mood.
nothing to, I'm not downplaying theater of the mind. Okay,
No.
theater of the mind is quick, right? It's super fast. Um,
And it lets
especially if you
you
got a
like
group of players that have been playing together for a while with that DM, because you guys start to get in sync more on how that DM's describing it and what it actually is. Okay, but just the same, that's one of the drawbacks to theater of the mind is I can be describing this, and of course, I, as the DM, I know what it looks like because it's in my head, or maybe I have it drawn out on a piece of paper. I know the map, and I'm describing it to you, and I might even describe it perfect, but that guy there is, in his mind, is seeing something different.
way different. Yeah.
Maybe
And I've
way
had to
different,
do
might be a
that a
little bit
couple
different, but it's different.
times.
So you could describe it again, and
Yeah.
this guy moved over here. Oh, so I'm going to do this. No, that's not really where you are. You're over here. People lose track of things. So physical terrain or minis, whatever, for your in-person game is really helpful, I think, for the vast majority of people. But there is time and expense involved in this as well.
I think it's also really good for battle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because physical locations become all the more important at that point.
I'm gonna
And
shoot at this guy. Oh well, you can't. You're behind a wall. And then if it's theater of the mind, you're like, wait, no, I said I was gonna move. And then you're like, well, you didn't. And then a player gets butthurt because you didn't let them do what they wanted to do. Um, but I've explained rooms before in theater of the mind, and my players are all like, what? And then I re-explain it, and I'm like, and then I even do like big hand motions and like, if this wall is and that wall is, and then they still kind of don't understand. Then I just draw it. I'm like, here
yeah,
you go, guys.
and
Here it is.
there are some people who just
Can't.
can't do it, right? They don't have the imagination, or they don't have the spatial awareness, and it's just not going to work for them at all. No matter how much you
3D
describe it, they
imaging.
have to physically see it, some sort of physical representation. What I question is, at what point, how much is too much? At what point
Oh, there is definitely a too much option.
there is, but no one can, and no, you can't. No one
Slows
can
pacing
define
down
how
too.
much is too much, right? I think it will vary from group to group, but how much is too much? Like I see, like you said earlier, I agree with you. There are some people that have these beautiful, beautiful whole tables full of all this terrain, and the
All
whole
painted.
town is laid out, or the whole castle is laid out, and it's phenomenal. But at what point does it really become detracting from the role playing of the game?
Unless it is the entire campaign, you are in that building. I'm not building you a whole building. just for you guys to leave in the next session. Not doing it. I'm a working individual.
So,
Like if I worked from home or I was part time or I was a work at, or a housewife where all I had to do is take the kids to school and come back home and live my life, I would definitely do all that crap. I would be there an hour early and I'd have dungeon squares all set up for the room that they're in and all that jazz.
so
Do I? No.
that's another thing to consider as well, is Julie and I don't play in our home. We go to one
No.
of the local game stores. So it's very
Take it with
different
me.
because everyone you see online that has these, again, these beautiful layouts,
It's
they're
probably the
not
basement.
transporting that stuff to someone
Yeah.
else's house every week. They're playing there at that table every
Yeah.
session.
So they have the whole week to
That's
set the
that's a big
terrain up
factor
on the
too.
board. Yeah.
Portability, right? If you're transporting this, you're going to a convention or you're going to your weekly gameplay and you rotate houses every week or whatever it is, that's something to weigh in the equation about how much you use and when. Is it really important I have it for tonight's session, or can we go a little theater of the mind on this, or maybe go a little lighter on the terrain versus other times? But I agree with you on combat. It's very helpful in combat to have that physical representation. Um, but that doesn't necessarily have to be physical 3D minis either, right?
No,
It's
it could
just
be
some sort of
tokens.
physical representation on the table, on your map, printed or hand drawn, your battle board, your battle mat, a printed map, whatever, to have some sort of representation, whether that be your little, what is it, 28 millimeter? 28 millimeter mini scale for
Yes.
your little figurines, if you will, whether it be a
Yes.
marble, a flat token, a piece of candy, whatever it is. Candy works good for bad guys, so when you kill them, you get to eat
To
them.
eat them,
I'm
a
just saying.
giant jelly donut.
I'm just putting that out there. Okay, just putting that
Do
out
you
there.
like the rings on your sodas?
Well, I use that for like condition rings, though, not for
Uh,
representation of
uh,
creatures.
you could
For
print stuff and Mod Podge it to a piece of wood.
I've done that before when I did it to like poster board. I've done that before too.
Yeah.
But
And then you have tokens.
yeah, I found myself not using that in the end because it was a pain in the ass. I got to print it, I got to glue it, I got to
Gotta
put some
print it.
sort of little foot or stand to it, and then for transportation, I got to take it off. And no, I got little glass
Marble.
beads or whatever from the Dollar
Yeah.
Tree, and it works just fine. I did
Stone.
thereafter. I did get flat minis, like acrylic minis. So same concept what you were talking about when you print it, but it was already done for me, and it was nice. It's very portable. It takes up essentially no room. They have
They're cute.
great artwork, but
Yeah.
they're much more expensive than the glass beads from the Dollar Tree. So, but the only game I'm doing in person, I have a player who, like Julie, loves his minis, so he brings minis for us every week. Right now, we're
He has a
dealing with
collection.
lizard men, so he either had or printed out some lizard men, and he and his wife painted the lizard men for us.
No, he buys them. He buys them, dog. He has a buying problem.
And Julie has a printing problem,
Yeah, I have a couple $100 worth of printers, so
and
I like to use them.
she prints all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, so you use terrain for
That's its
obviously
own hobby.
for visualization, right? To help all parties involved know what's going on and get a sense of scale and
Set
depth,
the
and
scene.
help set the scene. Um, Now, for me, again, I don't use 3D terrain, so I need to verbalize. I need to describe that scene. So, scenery-wise, it's theater of the mind to try to visualize what's there. But I do have a map of some kind, whether I have a printed map or that battle board will draw out that one room or the several rooms, whatever it fits on the board. What I've been doing recently, as a few people on YouTube brought to my attention, was if you have a simple map, which works great in
Oh,
first edition because
I
they're
was just
just
talking about them.
simple grid maps. There's no color, there's no artwork to it, super simple. Is I have them printed at Staples or Office Max or Office Depot or one of those type printing services, and they do it as a blueprint print.
It's super cheap.
So I get a 24 by 36 print for like 450. So
Mm-hmm.
they print out my whole map. I can roll. Well, I shouldn't say, I print it out, I lay it out on the table, and then I cover up, I fog it over, if you will, and slowly unfog or reveal, as they go along. So we have that visual representation, and then we can put down our tokens, our minis, our glass beads, whatever. So that's something as an option as well for mapping, and that's relatively cheap at whatever $4 or $5 for 24 by 36. Now, the challenge I found with that is getting the 1 inch scale for the grid. So it's got to be big to fit a 1 inch scale or 1 inch grid, excuse me. And then it's a question of the scale on the map. So the
Mm-hmm.
map we're using right now is a 10-foot scale. So one grid is 10 feet. So in order for
Mm.
me to blow that up big enough where two characters can fit in that 10-foot grid, I need a 2-inch grid on my printed map.
Yeah, that's
That's
big.
ginormous.
Yeah.
That's ginormous. Um, so on my first printing of this current map, it's two pages. It's like in the booklet, it's 2 pages, two 8.5 by 11. So I made those two into one PDF. So when I printed it at the print shop, it printed out fine on my 24 by 36 or whatever size I did, but the grid was like super tiny.
Oh no.
So I was like, crap. I was like, am I going to make it work? I thought about it. I said, nah, screw it. I'm just going to print it again. So instead of me putting the two together, I printed them separate. So I'm going to have like two maps that make up the one map. So it's split in half, but the
You just
scale
tape them
should
together.
be like 0.8 inches instead of a 1 inch scale, 0.8 inches. But again, that's still,
Mm-hmm.
well, that's the grid size, excuse me, 0.8 inch grid, but it's still a 10-foot scale.
Mm-hmm.
But so anyway, so that's an option as well to have the maps pre-printed, if you will.
Mm.
And then, how do you fog that over? So I just cover it with random pieces of scrap paper and slowly,
I've
unfog
seen
it
people
with
do
that.
black like construction paper.
So I recently saw Sly Flourish of the Lazy DM. He in one example he gave, he was showing using fabric like old T-shirts or something.
Old t-shirts.
So yeah, so
Oh,
I think I want to try that. I like that idea because then
cotton.
it's much easier to kind of just pull back a little bit versus trying to slide out a whole sheet of paper that hits the other sheet of paper and then it shows too much. And so I might try that. I got some old T-shirts or fabric hanging around, I'm sure, versus trying to use the sheets of paper to cover it up. So um,
Fiberfill.
yeah, like I showed you that picture. I showed you
A
that
big
picture.
cloud.
So for 3D terrain, yeah, that'll work well. Fiberfill is the stuff that
Yeah.
your decorative
You
pillows
have
are like filled
the
with.
like the open lock where they lock together and then you have a room and you want to block the room. Shoving just a handful of fiberfill in there would not damage the room
Right.
because you probably have like stuff terrain in the room because it's so soft and light. But it would also block what's in the room enough. But it would also not block what's in the room enough so that your players are
Yeah, what are you hiding
like
there?
looking in there. Yeah, what is that? What's going on? And I think that also adds to it a little bit. I wish I had like a modular table that I could just move squares around in, and I could just make the dungeon in the little square table that I have. I really can't wait to get a house. I'm gonna have a second living room that's just like a giant gaming room. I want a gaming table so bad.
You have a house.
Well, I know I have a townhouse. It's not a house. A standalone building. How about that? Does that count?
I'll tell you, my best apartment was my first apartment, which was a townhouse. Loved it.
Yeah, I love it.
Loved
I
it.
mean, it's not horrible. I like the separation. So when we get mad at each other, no, I'm kidding. Um, so when my child curses on his video games, he's all the way on the third floor, and I can sit all the way on the first floor and not hear him. Um, there's a lot of room in here for a townhouse. I'm really fortunate to have gotten it when I did. I have a really nice APR, but I digress. Um, I really also like doing I used to be really big into, like, miniature houses, like doll
Hmm.
houses. So, this terrain is very similar in scale. Doll houses are 1/12 and not 1/28, so it's double the scale.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like Barbie doll size, so like a kitchen cabinet's like this big, but in D&D a kitchen cabinet's this big. I also was really into 40K for a while, so 40K is a tabletop. It's not an RPG. It's a tabletop like MMORPG,
Oh, you're talking
where
about what is
it's
it?
a
World
war
of
game.
Warcraft?
No.
No, Warhammer.
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 Yeah. And you have like monsters, and the monsters fight the like soldiers, and it's like a war gaming kind of thing, like a World War II gaming board kind of thing. So I was really big into that because that was at my local game shop when I was playing cards, and I couldn't find a D&D group. So I got really big into that, and you have to make terrain for that, otherwise you can't play the game. So I got really big into terrain making, and I got really big into models from that hobby, and then I was like in this, and then I got into this hobby, and I'm like, yes, my hobby's now a lie, and I
So,
have now one mega hobby.
all right, so that will transition to my next thought of making your own terrain. Not everyone has a 3D printer, but that
No,
doesn't mean you can't make your own terrain.
yeah,
There are
Blylock
plenty of
is my
creative
favorite
ways and
for that.
affordable ways to make terrain. I'll give you my one simple example of the terrain that I made. I made dungeon walls. And
Dungeon
what
sticks.
and what I did was I went down to a store chain called Five Below, and they had their knockoff version of Jenga for $5. So I got to a bunch of little wooden blocks is what it is, right?
You
Building
can get them
blocks.
from the dollar store too.
Um, and then and there are tons of crafty little YouTube videos on how to make terrain, so it can be done.
So many.
Um, but I then took those blocks and I glued on those blocks. It's time consuming. Little square pieces of cardboard that I cut out of like the cereal box,
Yeah.
and then paint it black, a little dry wash with gray, and it looks like stone walls.
Soon enough,
So,
yeah.
so I made my own dungeon walls. So then you can put those out on the board and kind of create your rooms. I found myself later not using that, but the point is you can make your terrain, and if something like that works for you, you can do it on the cheap. I probably spent
Dungeon
even
sticks.
between the wooden blocks and a couple, truly $2 I think or $3 in paint. I did it
Mm-hmm.
all for less than $10.
Styrofoam that you get in appliance packaging. You can cut up styrofoam. A lot of people use insulation foam. That's the big
Yeah,
one. Is
yeah.
use the pink, the
And you
pink,
can get a giant sheet of that for whatever 10 or $20 or something. I don't know how much it actually
Pink
costs, but those are
Panther
big.
six
Yeah,
by four
yeah. You can get plenty of that on the cheap.
in a variety of densities for extremely cheap because it's a housing material.
Yep.
And then you can get you don't have to, a really nice sharp knife works just fine, but you can also get a wire cutter, and it's a heated wire.
So
You can sculpt the
I've
foam
I've
however you
learned
wish.
I've learned in life that you can often well you can make or look elsewhere for what you want and find it cheaper. What I mean, so if you want something for your boat, it's really expensive if you go to the boat store. But if you get
But
creative, you can come up with almost the exact same thing by going over here and it's half the
to the
price.
hardware store, yeah.
Whatever it is,
I,
right? So
crafting
just
supplies,
just be
man.
creative. Be creative in terms of how you're gonna make this or where you're gonna source the materials from. If you go to an online vendor that makes terrain for D&D, you're gonna pay through the nose. Now, granted, the quality
Through
is
the
likely to be
nose.
there, the durability will be. I get all that. You get what you pay for. I get it. But instead of me paying hundreds of dollars for terrain, if I can do it for 20 or $30,
Because I already
uh,
have it on hand.
I already have it, or I can find the materials cheap. I just need to actually make it myself, and it'll look pretty okay. I'm willing to look okay versus beautiful and save myself hundreds of dollars. To each their own, and we all have our own different budgets. So if you got the
Mine I've
budget
built
for it
up
and you want
over
to spend
time.
it, it
I
goes
have
back
so
to
much
our last
stuff.
video of what do you spend your money on, right? So in real life, if I have that if
Fantasy
I have
money.
that kind of money, if I have that kind of money in real life to spend on that, then hey man, all the power to me, right? Then I can afford to spend the money on that, or I'm willing to spend the money on that. So, and I rephrase it because it's not to say I couldn't afford that. I just choose not to spend my money on that. I just don't. spend hundreds of dollars on terrain.
I like I said, I was interested in other things. Got interested in D&D terrain, so I already bought it for other hobbies. So I now just have a surplus because you don't buy it in
It's
28 millimeter. You buy it in
yeah. You
a jug.
you can never buy just the amount that you need for the project.
No,
No.
no, ever, never. And before that, I did like general like classical painting stuff. I did acrylics a lot, so I have a large collection of little cheap bottles of acrylic paint. So I just have everything on hand, and if I get into a crafty mood or I have the time, then I craft my little heart out, and boom, terrain. You know,
So,
the
transporting
bases for
terrain.
my trees are cardboard boxes. I used like soda boxes and
Mhm.
like stuff from Costco boxes. And I cut out little shapes, and then I glued the tree down, and then I put sand, play sand on it, and all that fun jazz.
Oh, if you need some, I have sand. I have a bag and a half of sand from projects in the yard that I have left over right now.
I had one 50-pound bag of play sand that I bought from Home Depot so many years ago, and I have not even
Touched it.
raised it
Yeah.
because
All right.
I need it for micro use. I don't need it for macro use.
So, before we talk about or more about mapping, perhaps let's stay on terrain and minis. How do you transport that stuff, man?
I put it in a cardboard box and throw it in my car.
Yeah, but don't you have some sort of like giant tackle box or something you use?
My minis, I have a box that you put like drill bits and like tools and washers and screws from like Home Depot, and I put the minis in that. And they have like little boxes that you put all the stuff in, and I put them in that. I have that. But my terrain just gets thrown in a cardboard box that I have laying around, and then I just bring it to the store. And then the store's been really cool about not letting people steal my stuff, and I've just left it there and no one's stolen anything.
Yeah, I think and I use a small little, not a tackle box, but tackle organizer, fishing type thing, with like the different compartments. And I use that to transport, my dice and my little glass beads and stuff like that. But transporting
Yeah.
terrain, if you transport it, or for that matter, even if you store it at the house, like I've seen people with like big curio cabinets and stuff just full of terrain and all kinds of drawers and stuff. But
Bookshelves.
that's something you have to consider as well if you start amassing terrain and minis is storage and transportation.
Where are we gonna put it all?
Yeah, where are you going to put it all?
Yeah.
And
I got
if
told
you are
that the store was
sharing your
making
living space
shelving.
with someone else, this is a hobby, especially terrain. This is a hobby that can really explode before you know it, okay? You've heard of dice goblins, people who get like addicted to dice. Dude,
Terrain
it is just as
goblin.
bad, if not worse, with terrain and minis and stuff, because
Oh,
one
it's so
size
bad.
doesn't fit all.
No, it's so cute.
It can, but
One
everyone
scenario
wants their
doesn't fit
own
all.
mini. Everyone wants their
Yeah.
own mini, and then once you start getting into that,
Personalized.
you want your mini to look like the person or the
Yeah.
character or the creature.
Yeah.
So we can't use just a generic mini for that bad guy. We want that bad guy to look like the bad guy. So we're going to go make sure
Yes.
we're going to go out and get one or print one or whatever and paint it. And before you know it, you don't have three. I have 300 of these minis.
Correct. I probably have close to something like that. Couple hundred by now.
So if you are cohabitating with anyone, you need to be aware of the space, the potential for space, the explosion of your terrain and minis. And
Buying a
terrain even
storage unit.
takes up more space
Oh,
because
it does.
it's not it's a square
28
section of a wall or whatever, and you can't just collapse it and make it compact, and it doesn't work like that.
28 millimeters is actually pretty large. I could run if you wanted me to. If you wanted to pause the video, I can run upstairs and grab I have a cabin upstairs
A
that I can
cabin.
go and grab. I
All
have a
right,
cute little wood cabin.
all right, ready, go. All right, Julie, you stepped away for a second to grab that terrain of some kind to show me
Yeah.
this
You ready?
house, or yeah, I'm ready.
You ready? Da, da, da.
All right, now is that all one piece? No, comes apart.
No.
Okay,
So here's the roof. And then the inside has a playable interior.
I like that. Yeah, so how long did it take to print that?
And then the porch has its own little, and then the door.
Oh, that's neat. I like that it comes out.
Yeah, the door slides out. Each piece, I think it was like 5 hours.
Which is
For
a long
painting.
time, but again, you just hit print and you walk away. So
Especially with my printer because I have a nicer one. Some of the other ones you do have to babysit. They're a little finicky. But I bought a really nice one. It was on sale for Black Friday, and yeah, I just hit print and walk away, and it does. And I
so
even have a video feed if I want to check on it.
that's neat. One thing
Yeah.
I will say though on minis and terrain is, and this is nothing against you, Julie, but if you're going to buy them unpainted or if you're going to print them, take the time to paint them. And I
I
say
would like
that
to
because
actually paint mine.
I have been at tables or game experiences where everyone's using unpainted minis, and guess what? They all look the friggin' same at that point.
They're all gray.
They're all gray. They're all the same. At that point, I might as well use
Like,
different colored marbles or glass beads or whatever. It's all the same. So you gotta pay. If you don't buy them pre-colored or painted or whatever, take the time to paint them, please. Like if you're gonna do it, do it. If you're gonna be in, you gotta be all in.
I have too many now. That's why I offer to, like, as a break, as a DM burnout break day. I offered to do a painting day where we all just hang out and bullshit and paint.
Yeah,
And then I have
and
my
during that
table of
session,
8.
did anyone paint minis for you?
So I did have one at my house, and the one at my house, yeah, we painted witches, and Rachel painted a giant bird, and James painted a bunch of gargoyles.
Yes, but did they leave with them or did they leave them with you because they're yours?
They left them with me because they're
Okay,
mine.
okay.
Yeah. Take my minis.
So
Bring
no,
your own.
but yeah, if you're gonna do it, you got to do it. Um,
Yeah, this would be so cute if I painted it. I
and I
just
get it.
never
It
get
takes
around to it.
time, but that's where there's a certain level of commitment, and that's also where the hobby aspect comes in of role playing game versus I'm just playing a game. If you really embody it, it really is a hobby. Can be, should be a hobby, and if you're gonna do the train aspect or the minis or what have you, you gotta go all in if you're gonna do it. All or nothing.
Oh yeah.
All or nothing.
Otherwise, it's not. It
The,
doesn't provide the same level of wow
it
that you
doesn't,
want it to.
and to the
Yeah.
point where it can actually be confusing. If I have 10 minis on the table and they all kind of look the same because no one has color, they're all just gray. It can be confusing.
I think the only person I have 2 players who are painted at no 3. I have 3 players who are painted at my table. James was painted, but he broke his, so he had to reprint his. So his new one isn't painted, but Sophia's is painted, uh, Chase is painted, and Corey's painted. Everybody else is gray though, including me. All of my things are gray.
So, for again, and last time I'll say, like for me, I either rather have painted minis or no minis, and use tokens or glass beads or discs or something else.
Yeah, that's
Just
why I was like tokens or discs, like flat wooden disc with a really pretty picture on it,
um,
and then you Mod Podge the picture.
so we mentioned earlier about don't buy D&D stuff, buy other stuff to use for D&D. So for those tokens, what works well for that? Friggin' bingo chips,
Yeah, bingo chips.
and those are dirt cheap. So
Hold
are the
on.
glass beads from like the dollar discount stores too, and they work just fine. They work just fine for your minis or represent bad guys or whatever. I don't know where Julie went, but so all right. So anything? Oh, she can't hear me. All right, Julie. Anything else you want to
I was
add
listening.
on
Sorry.
on terrain or anything?
It's amazing. Don't listen to Keith. No, I'm kidding. It's each their own. I am just a crafty individual, and I like art photographs, and
Oh,
it brings me much joy.
I like the 3D terrain. Don't don't let Julie mislead you. I like the 3D terrain. And I like the use of minis 100%. Um, for me
You
though,
could find a game shop that has a bunch of already made terrain,
hmm.
and maybe that's why you go to that game shop because they have
Oh, because you can use it,
3D
you mean? Just
terrain.
to use
Yeah,
it? Yeah.
yeah.
So I like 3D terrain and I like minis more so. Um, but for me, if it gets to be too much, it gets to be too much, and it can really detract from the game, and people get too focused on the terrain and the colors and the physicality of it, and detract from the role play of the game. So for me, there's a line there. No one can define that line, not even myself, but there is a line where it gets to be too much. So, but I do like it though. Like for a room or two, or just like a session, yes, I'm all for it. And
Yeah, I'm not building a whole dungeon. I think it's great.
no,
I think it's a sprinkle. I think it's a seasoning.
yeah, like even if I had the space, like you said, right? If I had the space, I had a designated game room or a D&D table, whatever. I'm not going to build out the whole friggin' thing. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not.
Ain't nobody for that.
No. So that's what I got on terrain. I'm all for it. I mean, I'm all for it. But if you're going to do it, you got to have color. Just like printing stuff. Like when you print stuff at home, your printer, man, it looks so much nicer when it is in color versus grayscale, right?
I always put my stomach
You
grayscale.
know, and I mean, listen, and if I print grayscale, I often will, but man, it just looks so much nicer when stuff's in color. Why? Because we live in color. We live in black and
Yeah,
white.
yeah. For you to embody it.
So we live in color, and we have the capabilities, technology, for our things to live in color too. Our paper printed 2D stuff, our 3D printer stuff. You can print in color now 3D
Oh
even, and
yes,
if
you
not,
can.
you can paint it. So, I say a fresh coat of paint brings new life to anything. So throw some paint on
Yeah,
mini.
funny to
And
take
terrain.
that.
Paint terrain is just one of the things
Got
it
it.
is.
I can very fast, and I don't know why I do more. I don't do more often, but
So, all
I'm
right.
bad.
So that's what I got in terrain. So someone raised a question to us the other night, Julie, about the map itself, a hex map versus a grid map. So,
Pros, cons, otherwise, questions, comments, concerns.
so on my table, I always use not now I'm using the actual physical 2D printed map from the print shop. Outside of that, I have a battle board that I will unfold. I don't know, it's 24 by 28 or something, whatever it is, and I'll draw out the room or as much as will fit on that board before we erase it and redraw as the party continues into wherever they're going.
Right.
And I draw that on a 5 foot scale, a 5 foot scale. So 1 inch grid is 5 feet. One creature, one mini can operate in a 5 foot area, so the 1 inch grid, right? So it works out well for that scale. Even if my map in the module is a 10 foot scale, I'll draw it on a 5 foot scale. And I find that generally works pretty well. The I don't have a battle mat, kind of like a roll up, a paper or a fiber one of some kind. Mine is a physical, like cardboard board, a battle board, I
When's
think they
next
call it.
go?
I use it by erase or wet erase. I can use either.
Gotcha.
To that point, if you're going to be using that same board all night and not redrawing it because the party's moving slow or going to take a lot of time in that what you're drawing out, use a wet erase so they don't smudge it as they're moving their tokens around.
I will say I need to get a set of wet array
But
because that is a good point, and it happens to me often.
but if you're going to be redrawing this or you're drawing it real quick just to portray something and you're going to move on, then you can use the dry erase and quickly change that. On the back side of my battle board is a hex. And I don't think I've ever used hex in actual gameplay that I'm drawing something out. I've only used hex maps on 2D printed that was for large areas like outdoors covering hundreds or thousands of miles, because typically the hexes are like a 8 mile scale or 24 mile scale, so they're used for large areas, and I don't think that the hexes work well otherwise. They're not going to work well in a dungeon crawl. They're not going to work well in a mansion or a boat even, right?
Oh, I think they
Why?
look horrible.
Because guess what? The walls of my house are kind of straight. So why not use a square grid? The dungeons are relatively straight. Now, a dungeon, I guess one could make an argument for a hex because dungeon walls aren't always nice and straight and carved out, more of a cavern perhaps. Um, but even at that, I at that point, if you're drawing curved lines, it doesn't really matter if I'm using a hex or a square grid. But again, other than outdoor terrain, I don't see the need or benefit of using a hex. Julie's checking her phone, so then we'll get her thoughts.
I'm sorry. I don't like how hexes look, but I do understand them as organic shapes. I might have to go soon. As organic shapes, the process of building a continent or a continental map, I just think they look horrible still. I don't like them. I would rather a gridless map at that point. Gridless. Or
Yeah,
I would
okay.
like it to be juxtaposed on top of a beautiful picture, and then you put the grid on top of it and you just say, here it is, like here's the grid if you have to count some BS out. Like there's a game, a board game called Heroescape, and you play on hex tiles, and it just looks, it's like D&D, both hex tiles, and it just looks so bad. And
So,
it is it's outdoors, it's not interior, it's outdoors, like you fight outside all the time. And so there's like rivers and mountains and like plains and stuff like that, and I just hate it. I don't like it. I don't even like minis with hex bases. I don't they, it looks bad. I hate it.
like I said, I'm plenty okay with using a hex on, like you said, outdoorsy stuff. But once you start getting subterranean or inside a structure or something, then
Square.
definitely
Square please.
square. Even in if you're just in like a town, I'm okay using
Square
a
please.
square.
Or you give me one of the little like bars that says an inch is a mile,
Mhm.
and then you can just measure it,
Well, right, but
or you
if
can estimate.
and most hexes are that they tell you that what this. I mean, any map's going to have a scale, otherwise you don't know. But you said
There you
something
go.
that caught my attention. What are you doing?
So that's an inch
Oh,
from that knuckle of your thumb to that knuckle of your thumb.
oh, for a lot of people, the width of their thumb is
Oh, not me.
about an inch.
My little
All right,
thumb.
so you said something that caught my attention. You said lay over the hex. So
Or lay over a picture.
yeah,
Hex
okay.
overlaid on top of a pretty picture.
So that brings up an interesting thought, though, that
I'll find one.
in physical in-person gameplay, you could have layers of maps, just like we do with our software. We have different layers. So you could lay down an acrylic sheet or like a transparency, and that's all laid out with the hex. And then on top, and then well, underneath that is the map itself. Then you lay down the hex. Then on top of that, you lay down whatever
Don't show
aspect of
this
terrain.
in the video because it is Strahd's map. It's Barovia,
And
and it's a pretty crappy picture. But you can kind of see the hexes overlaid on a topographical map. And that's like what I would prefer is a pretty picture of a map with hexes on top of it that you can't really see.
so that goes back to um,
An overlay.
the overlay, but the types of maps, right? If it's a simple like line drawing, like you get in the classical first edition stuff, and like what a lot of people do when they make their own maps, especially world maps, it's all just line
Mhm.
drawings, as opposed to the artwork type maps you get now with fifth edition and 5.5, where it gets much more artsy and
Yeah,
colorful and
someone
stuff.
dedicated
And
a couple
it's
hours to it.
and again, going back to painted terrain and a whole big thing, a board table full of terrain, it's beautiful. I get it, and I appreciate that. for the artistic value. But when it comes down for me to see that nice and easy and quick in gameplay, man, you can't go wrong with just a line drawing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because
And you're like, here it
yep,
is, and then
here
they're like, oh, and that's it.
because your mind can process that a lot faster, a lot easier. It takes less CPU power, less RAM for me to process all that. So,
It just comes with my module, so I'm just lucky enough to be able to play modules instead of make my own homebrew my own, because I ain't got no time for that.
mm, you say that, but you piece it. You can piece it. I'm saying you can piece it
I
together. You
probably
don't have
could.
to. You don't have to
I
sit down and
know.
make a module all at once. You piece it together.
Yeah, slowly, slowly,
You know,
slowly over
to
the
the
course
point
of
where
however many
okay,
weeks.
we'll get a little sidetrack here. Like I thought about how could or could we, you and I, make a module campaign, whatever rhetoric you want to use, a module. You and I sit down and create this module together, a fifth edition version and a first edition version, and we play at the same time
And see how our
at
players
our two
handle
different
it.
tables. Yeah,
We
and
could
and
theoretically already do that with stupid Salt Marsh, but
and just the same. Yeah, but we're too far in now. And just the
I
same,
know.
how do we each DM that? Because as you and I role play the NPCs, we're going to play those differently, and that's going to have a
All the
huge
way
impact
differently.
on the whole game. So that would be
It'd be
interesting too.
fun to do like a video, a YouTube side by side, where we like do a vlog and we post mine versus yours.
That would be funny too.
And then our role for mastery is our similarities and differences.
So yeah, okay, so we could do that though, even if we don't do a video of the well, we won't be able to video the gameplay, but we could do that
No.
too. We could sit down and we spend the first 15 or 20, a whole separate um, playlists on YouTube,
Podcast.
right? Where we sit down and for 10 or 15 minutes, I tell you what happened in my game for that module, and then the second half you tell me about what happened in your game, and we just laugh at each
Face
other.
off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we just laugh at it.
Just to document.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we could do that. Or just the same, we could each do a little 5 or 10 minute blurb of what we did in our games, and that's its own separate video, and then whoever can go back and watch them, and like you said, do that comparison.
Oh, and then do an actual blind side by side.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a duet.
All right. Any any other thoughts you want to tell me on your on terrain in general? How can we? Oh, let me ask you this: what can we do with a drunken sailor? What can we do to improve the use of terrain in in-person gameplay?
Have it prepared is the biggest one. Have your stuff prepared. Don't do me and leave it all in a giant box and a mess. Some people even like to put out their minis and their terrain for what they're going to use for what they anticipate the session as part of their DM prep in like its own box, and that is the session box. Of course, people are doing this in their homes, in their basements. So they will have if they need something off the wall, they go to the wall and get it. But they have most of what they need right there ready to go. And that way you're not sitting in a box, digging in the box, looking for something specific, trying to find that treasure chest mimic, because it's going to be a treasure chest and it's going to be a mimic, so it has two minis, for when the players touch it. Um, but to have it all prepared and ready to go is definitely a large part of it because it'll slow gameplay down if you're sitting there digging in a box and you're like, I can't find this mini.
So
You know,
even in the case of or using you as an example, someone who travels with their terrain, right? Um, if you have the means to transport everything you have without being too cumbersome because your collection is that manageable size, then you can bring it all with you, right? If
yeah, and
not,
then
then
digging isn't that
then
bad.
like what you're saying is you have to select what you bring. I have to select what I pull out ahead of time. So if I'm at home, I can pull out, like you said, I can pull out these 3 or 4 I think we're going to use, but everything else is right there at my disposal if I do need it. If I'm
Yeah,
traveling and I can't take everything with me, then obviously I need to be selective. I want to take everything I think we need. If I can, I'll take what maybe we'll need. But what if I take some, if I don't bring something that I needed? Well, then we're back to theater of the mind, or just using a little imagination, or grabbing a piece of candy that someone had, and we make do. But even when you transport that stuff to your game, because you know you're going to bring more than what you need because you never really know exactly what you're going to need. Think then, even when you're getting set up before you start, just to pull that stuff out and say, I brought these 20 different pieces. I think we're going to need these 10. I'm going to pull these 10 out now and have that on the table behind my screen
I like
or
one
off to the
behind my
side,
screen.
whatever. And I have the other 10 that maybe we'll need in my bag. But like you said, prep, getting it ready ahead of time, get it
I
ready
like to do that
before you start.
when my players are talking. They like to role play with themselves on the road. That sounds bad. They like to they like to role play in the party, and I'll set a little timer, and it'll be like a 3-minute timer, and they can talk amongst themselves for 3 minutes, whether that's in character doing role play, find out your background type information, or it's just generalized talk about yourself mode time. Once the timer goes out, I roll some dice. So in that timer session, I get to go and pull some minis while they're talking amongst themselves.
Yep. Okay. And I think the only thing I'll add as a non-terrain user is to make the experience better, color.
Lots of color.
Color. Color makes it better. Color makes
It
everything better.
does.
You know, paint
It
makes
looks nicer.
it does. Even if it's like a crappy paint job, it still looks better
Yeah,
than
slap shot.
unpainted,
Bam.
you
Yeah,
know,
correct.
because it helps distinguish this gray piece of plastic from that gray piece of plastic. You
Hmm.
know, because if for those of you who have been around a long time, they no longer make them out of pewter. They're all
No,
plastic
they're all
now.
plastic. They're all metal.
Plastic and lightweight plastic at that.
Oh my god.
Plastic. Okay. I wish I had still
No
had my
metal
pewter
minis.
minis, but anyway. Okay. So any closing thoughts on mapping?
I
What?
hate hex grids. My closing statement. I really don't like them. I think they're a go. I really like having grids in game systems. Some people use a ruler and they don't use a grid at all. They just play with a ruler, kind of like it's 40K, which I could do. I mean, getting a ruler is super cheap. Even getting a handful of rulers is super cheap. And you could play with a ruler if you wanted to, and you could measure it all out. I feel like it would slow gameplay down, but comma maps kind of slow gameplay down. Theater of the Mind is the fastest by far, but we are silly little chameleon goblins and we want our things to look pretty and to look a certain way. And if that helps our gameplay, it helps our gameplay. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it helps people see things, visualize things a lot easier. And I think that's a lot of the reason why we do what we do to help with visualization of
That
our
brings up an interesting point
mechanics.
though, using a ruler. Not the use of a ruler, but the measurement and the grid size and scale and moving
The
minis
grid goes
around,
away.
right? Moving
Yeah.
minis around. So I guess that's one of the issues I have with using terrain and minis is it can, if you're not careful, start to feel like a board game.
Oh, you
And
say that a lot.
I do,
Yeah.
and not a role-playing game. And I think for me, it's not so much about the use of terrain and minis. It's about the way we play, the mechanics that we get. Sometimes we get so focused on movement rate, movement distance, and all this stuff.
The people who
And
do the trigonometry to move diagonally.
and I don't, as the DM, again for smoothness and speed of gameplay, I don't worry about that too much because your movement rate, if your movement rate is 9, right? That means 90 feet per your turn, okay?
45.
Which in your 1 inch grid would mean 9 grids, 9 squares I can move. What effing kind of indoor battle scene am I going to have that I cannot get from point A to point B with a movement of
And
9?
9. Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. It doesn't
No.
matter. Don't count your
Move where you
spaces.
want.
Just move where you want to go, and you're there. You can make it. Anyway,
Unless it's some really far, like
well,
jump
right.
shot,
If it's obviously a
then
huge
hey,
area,
count that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then that can lead us into a whole other conversation about zone combat,
Oh, zones
where yeah, zone combat, which
combat.
that'll be a discussion in the future. Once Julie and her table feels really comfortable with no initiative combat,
I
that
don't
I
think they
introduce
do.
them to. Once they feel really comfortable with that, we can talk about zone combat. And I say that because I don't want to introduce too many unknowns or variables to you guys all at once. But anyway, so I think that's why. I have issue, or one of the things that kind of bothers me about the use of terrain and maps and minis at the table is it can feel too much like a board, or it has potential to feel more like a board game than a role-playing game, and there's often too much emphasis on movement.
Yeah, there
and
is.
and that contributes to the feel of a board game when they start moving their minis, and I've seen it, and start counting
Oink,
grids,
oink, oink,
one,
oink,
two,
oink,
three,
oink,
four.
oink,
That's how
oink,
far I
oink.
can
I
move.
think but what else are they gonna do with the mini, you know?
Slide it. Oh, I want to move there, or just but just like don't count, just move it. I want to move there. Boom.
Yeah, and I have people who do that.
Instead of just counting, why am I counting? I know I'm going to make it.
Yeah, I do it with the monsters sometimes if they're going really far distances. I'll go 5, 10,
Now,
15, 20,
I mean,
25, 30.
if
I
you're
will
doing if you're
pick it
doing
up
it
and
for
drop it.
emphasis, right, with the bad guy, and you say, "Oh, this guy's really fast. 1, 2, 3, 15, 16, 17. That's how far he can move." And like, holy shit.
Yeah,
So if you're doing like for emphasis, right, maybe. But even then, you can just go. He went that far
yeah.
without,
And then they're like,
you know, because then I think if you start counting, and then maybe the bad guy moves a little longer next time because you're not counting and you're estimating, and someone's going to call you out because you. Anyway, I'm not going to get
overmove
side.
the
I'm
bad
not going to get
guy.
on a soapbox or
I know.
sidetracked. Um,
I know. It's
I
time.
I like terrain. Yes, it's time. I like terrain. I like minis. Just make sure they're colorful. And I like theater of the mind because that's how I first learned to play. We didn't have minis, and um, I prefer square grids and not hex, unless
I
it's
hate hex.
outdoors, in which case I accept hex. And those are my closing remarks. Julie, I'll give you last word before we finish session number 13 of Roll for Mastery.
Make hobby time, game time things. Do hobbies. Hobbies are fun. It doesn't matter if you're good at terrain. Terrain is so easy to make because nature isn't perfect and it is fun. Do a hobby. Get a hobby.
And
Enjoy a hobby.
and therefore your
Love a
terrain
hobby.
doesn't need to be perfect either.
No, it doesn't. It's
Okay.
great.
All right, you guys, have a good night. We're done.
Mount Cub Scout.